Yes, I believe so.
Thank you.
We may have a board member who is having difficulty entering still, so Ms. White might be just a moment late, but I think we're working it out.
Oh, Ms. Candace White, okay. I will now call the regular meeting of the Louisville Metro Air Pollution Control Board to order. Due to the COVID-19 outbreak, we are conducting the monthly meeting today by video teleconference. The first thing I have on the agenda this morning is recognition of a quorum. I will conduct a roll call of board members that are present on this teleconference. When I call your name, please say yes, or please say I'm here. Steve Sullivan.
Here.
Dr. Colbert? Here. Dr. May?
Can you hear me? I'm here.
Yes. Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Candace White? Marissa Neal?
Here.
Thank you. And Dr. Daniel Gertz. See you? Okay. Mrs. Hampton, do we have any introductions this morning?
No, sir, Mr. Hilton.
Okay. Public recognitions, Mrs. Hamilton?
Not today.
Okay. The regular minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of September were distributed and delivered to you electronically for your review. Are there any changes to the minutes by board members?
Not for me.
No.
Okay. The minutes as submitted stand approved. Mr. Gary, has anyone registered to make a comment this morning?
Yes, Chairman Hilton. Dr. Burkhart has registered to speak. She is here with us present in the Jefferson room. We're going to stand right in front of where Ms. Neal would be. She's actually attending virtually today.
Okay.
Hold on one moment, actually. Our video seems to be disconnected over here. Just on my end. We're good.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Burkhart.
I am Dr. Mary Tyler Burkhart. I hope everyone has had a chance to read the letter that was sent earlier. I am sorry to pass this burden on to the board. I'm here to put a face on what is happening in St. Matthews. I will tell you a little bit about my history. I went to Assumption High School, the University of Kentucky, and graduated with a BS in accounting, got married, and went on to become a certified public accountant. Being a CPA is a wonderful career, but I left accounting to become a physician. My first job as a physician was at St. Mary and Elizabeth Hospital. While at St. Mary's, I volunteered to join the effort by the medical community to help enact smoke-free legislation in Louisville. A few months after the legislation passed, I was awarded the Volunteer of the Year by the American Lung Association of Kentucky and a Community Health Charities Award. I learned that everyday people have a voice. Public health matters, and now everyone agrees that was the right thing to do and it was necessary. There is a glue manufacturing plant in the heart of St. Matthews that works with hazardous and flammable chemicals next to a densely packed community of schools, churches, restaurants, shops, houses, nursing homes, and businesses. Palmer Products lists VOCs and other toxins as a part of their process. The EPA states that the health effects of VOCs include cancer, damage to the lungs, liver, kidney, and central nervous system. The central nervous system is the brain and spinal cord. Palmer Products admits to emitting chemicals beyond their fence line, using very old equipment, heating asphalt in tanks at excessively high temperatures, and causing asphalt tank fires. Based on my experience and research, I seriously doubt that this plant can safely operate in this location. The plant is too old, the chemicals are too dangerous, there are too many emissions, and it is too close to vulnerable populations. I think it is outrageous that they don't monitor and report their emissions. Why have they been allowed to operate emission sources without proper permits, missed multiple deadlines, and failed to submit required information?
Dr. Burkhart, one more minute.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
One more minute.
Okay. I'll be under that.
Okay.
What's the point of having rules that aren't enforced? And this isn't right. Please audit them and enforce the rules. This includes air, soil, and water testing for all chemicals because they emit to emitting beyond their fence line, and they have underground storage tanks. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your concerns and issues with the board regarding Palmer Products. And I also like to thank Mr. Houston for the very detailed letter which was shared with the board members. Also, thank you very much. Any questions or comments from board members?
Before we continue, give me one moment.
Okay.
The video from this laptop is not working.
Okay.
It works on here. It does not show up on any other location.
Thank you all for your patience in trying to have this virtual kind of hybrid meeting. It does raise some challenges.
There's a lot of challenges. It's been almost going on 3 years for this, isn't it?
I think we get it figured out, but not yet.
While we're working on that, on this little problem, Mrs. Hamilton, she will address most of your concerns and issues in her direct report coming up shortly.
Yeah, see if we can zoom out this camera.
Byron, I can move down if you'd like.
If you want to sit where Dr. Garst would be, sure. I believe I can fit everybody just barely on if you're there.
I can move down.
I'm comfortable, and the light is so much better over here.
Oh, okay.
Does that work?
Gary, has anyone provided written comments this morning?
I have received a copy of Dr. Burkhart's comments in writing, and I'll distribute those to the board afterwards.
Thank you very much.
Can
Appreciate
I
it.
ask a question?
Yes.
And you may address this, Director Hamilton, my question is a matter of process, responsibilities.
Got that.
Okay.
I think,
Okay,
but if you'll allow me to go through my
we'll do. Thank you.
Okay.
super.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in the Edison room that wish to make a comment? If so, raise your hand. Are there any other members of the public that wish to make a brief comment on this teleconference? Please raise your hand by teleconference and you will be called on. This is a feature that you can find on the participants list or by pressing *3 if joining by phone, and you will be called upon. Mr. Gary, has anyone wish to speak?
I do not see any raised hands, Chairman.
Okay. Well, that completes the public portion of the meeting. I have requested that Director Hamilton address concerns raised in the public comment during her director's report today. Just moving down for the agenda. There is no unfinished business today. There's no new business. The committees have not met in the last month. And now we're down to Mrs. Hamilton, Director's report.
Thank you, Chairman Hilton. And good morning, board members. And I'd like to introduce Quan Nguyen, our Jefferson County attorney today, who is here substituting for Stacy Dott this week. So thank you, Quan, for joining us this morning. I'll begin my report with Palmer Products. The district has shared a copy of the letter sent on behalf of Dr. Burkhart with the board. And for folks not familiar with Palmer Products, it's located, small stationary source located near Chenoweth Square, kind of backs up to the back of the football field there at Trinity High School, and it's kind of right behind Lonnie's Hot Dogs. For any issue other than air, we encourage you to report that to the Kentucky Division of Water and to the Kentucky Division of Waste Management, since that media, that environmental media, is outside of APCD's jurisdiction. I'm going to focus today on the issues raised in the letter beginning in 2015, since this follows the district's reorganization in 2014. I do, however, want to assure everyone that the issues raised, including some dating back to the early 2000s, are not ongoing or continuous violations, and those were addressed by the district at that time. With that in mind, the district, as part of its reorganization, evaluated its operations, including its permitting programs, reviewing the sources that it regulates. And at that time, using more appropriate emission factors, reviewing operations, and re-estimating potential emissions, many companies, including Palmer Products, were properly reclassified from a federally enforceable district origin operating permit type source to a minor source. And I don't want folks to get too hung up on the definitions of major, VDOO, or minor sources, since these titles are only intended to identify sources that rightly should be regulated under the Prevention of Significant Deterioration, or PSD program, or Title V of the Clean Air Act. Palmer Products is not subject to either of these programs, nor is it subject to the district's Strategic Toxic Air Reduction Program. That said, in all cases, whether a facility is a major source of VDOO or a minor source, all of the district's regulations that may apply to that source are applied in its permit. This includes Palmer Products, which again, as I said, is a small source. It generally emits about 1 ton of nitrogen oxides, primarily from the combustion of natural gas, and roughly 5 tons of volatile organic compounds per year. Palmer Products manufactures mastic for mirrors. As part of that, asphalt is used in its binder. It previously included asbestos fibers, as many products in the past have. It now instead includes a cellulosic material instead of asbestos. Their permit has been revised to reflect that change. In 2018, the district received a single complaint about asphalt-like odors from Palmer Products. In 2019, we received 3. In 2020, we received 6. Between September 2021 and March 2022, the district's records show that we received 46 complaints from roughly 2 individuals. Since then, the district has not received any complaints regarding Palmer Products. As always, our compliance officers investigate these complaints for compliance with the district's odor regulation. And I want to be clear. You can think about the district's regulation in 2 tiers, one being general community standards, and many of those regulations are found in Part 1 of the district's regulations, and that would include our odor regulation, 1.13, and it essentially says that you can't have objectionable odors off of your property in a place where the public may be able to perceive them. Then we have the regulatory program, or our industrial engineering program. And the rules that are applicable on that side of the operation are found through Parts 2, or Regulations Part 2 through Part 7. In late 2019, the district issued a notice of violation to Palmer with a $1,000 civil penalty, which we offered to settle for $750. This discount is the district's long-standing practice for cases that it believes may settle. This practice allows us to avoid the potential cost of litigation and use our legal resources effectively and efficiently. In 2020, the district followed up with Palmer and directed the company to install new equipment to more efficiently heat the asphalt to reduce odors. Palmer Products makes its mastic in batches. Once a month, they heat the asphalt, and over the next 7 days or so, they make and package their product. DJ Fountain, our Industrial Compliance Engineering Supervisor, and his team have been on site numerous times since early this year to observe the installation of the new heating equipment. Eva Addison, Industrial Permitting Supervisor, and Randy Shanebackler, Engineer 2, have also been on site several times, including last week, as they work on Palmer Products' more recently submitted application. The district works with small companies, a concept that is embodied in the Clean Air Act and recognized in its Small Business Compliance Assistance Program and tenants thereafter. And we did so in this case. What we can resolve through a phone call and obtain compliance is an effective use of our time and limited resources. Taking further enforcement action once compliance has been achieved for something that we resolve with a phone call can be a high cost to our resources. I want to assure the board and the public that the district has had substantial contact with Palmer Products and that we are committed to our regulatory mandate. I'm joined this morning by Matt King, PE, and Stephen Gravett, PE, the district's 2 air pollution control officers, and we are available to answer any questions that the board may have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions from board members?
Just one, I think. So the emissions, the VOC emissions, come primarily from heating asphalt?
Yes.
For the process?
Correct.
I see. And are there any controls on the emissions other than the fact that the equipment was modernized?
No, there's no control on this.
So it's just like, kind of like heating up something on your stove and fumes?
It's the tank has an overflow pipe,
Mm-hmm.
so it's sealed except for a small opening. It's not an open top tank like you would be talking about on your stove. But yes, it's got they upgraded to an oil-based heater. It recirculates hot oil through the tank to keep it.
I see. So is the overflow pipe vented to the atmosphere at low level or through that? I know there's a big smokestack there.
No, it's at ground level. It's not at the sunset.
It's ground level. Okay. I guess the smokestack was,
The smokestack is from their World War II era operation.
okay.
It's used for what? The smokestack?
I don't think it's used for anything.
It's abandoned?
You mentioned that we had, they generate 1 ton of NOx.
That's from burning natural gas.
Okay. The heat up, yeah, okay.
For the process and for heating the building? Okay.
This is Dr. May.
That's all I have.
Yeah, Dr. May.
My question is, we monitor on a gross level, at the Cannons Lane site, but is there any monitoring on a micro level, so because, that's the community level for the NOx and all that?
So nitrogen oxides, of course, are a constituent of ozone.
Well, I meant the
not
VOC, such,
No, there are no ambient air monitors for volatile organic compounds from Palmer Products. There's no source-specific monitoring required.
So, so when we monitor at Cannons Lane, that's going to be on the macro level, for, the 24-hour period of time, and that it meets our clean air standards, but we really don't know on any, say, micro or hour, just for that day for when they're in production.
So we do operate an auto gas chromatograph during ozone season as part of our photochemical assessment monitoring at the Cannons Lane monitor. This has been our first year of full operation of that equipment, and that is primarily looking at those photochemically reactive compounds, but it also gives us a way to compare them to the air toxics that are emitted in rubber towns, many of which are the same photochemically reactive compounds. But to your question, Dr. May, there is no ambient air monitoring for a volatile organic contribution from this source or any other source in Jefferson County.
Mhm. Okay,
We
thank
have
you.
our air toxic monitoring in West Louisville, where we have a paired auto GC. And now we have that similar system running in Cannons Lane, looking at those chemicals for their ability to form ozone.
And then when they're under production, I mean, I don't know if it's a lingering effect for the whole time for that 1 week, or you know, are they complaining? Is it just an hour of the day? I don't have a sense of that.
Well, we'll use our complaint data as a guide here, because that's when citizens report their concerns to us. As I said, in 2018, we had one, then we saw some increased numbers between 2018 and 2021 through March of 2022. And since then, we've received no complaints. Many of our staff live near this facility, and their own observations are that they do not perceive an odor. And our COs, our compliance officers, have it on routine surveillance so that we go by at times where we might be in the area to observe odors on a varied schedule.
And those random inspections are noted and documented.
Well, I went by there yesterday, and I didn't smell anything, because it was very rainy, but I guess it's not constant discharge of this asphalt smell, I guess.
Is the production process scheduled, you know, the batch?
It's a batch process.
And the district has been there when they have been operating.
And really quick, just for the record, I don't know if it's been clear. I believe the batch is not.
Mr. Hassman, sorry, if you want to speak, step a little closer to the phone so they can hear you on
My apologies.
Yeah.
Yes, it's just to make it clear, it's not 1 day or 2 days or even a week. It's typically 12 days or potentially longer, depending on when they're making a batch. And it's
Okay.
continuous for those 12 days.
Okay.
Per month.
Per month, okay.
So my question is, to get back to the process, the letter comes to the board.
Mm-hmm.
Does the board respond?
So, well, in this case, we've shared it with the board. The board, the district has shared its response, which is that we have investigated the odor complaint. We have taken action to reduce the odors by seeing the company install new equipment to more efficiently heat the asphalt. Our compliance officers are here every day, and we ask that people report those odors to us when they perceive them so that we can dispatch them to also see if they violate our odor reg. The company has submitted an application for equipment, and the district is working through that application. So the board may direct the district to come back and provide an additional report on our work with the application as that proceeds, and when we have issued that, and if there are any follow-up from our work on that permit application. Juan, if you have some suggestions for the board,
Well, my question is, does the board have a responsibility to respond?
Do we have to respond to Mr. Houston's letter?
I think it's at the discretion of the board, whether or not you all want to respond and in what fashion. If it's a reasonable fashion, for what, Ms. Hamilton indicated, then that would be one avenue to pursue.
In that case, I move that we ask the district to write us a report and address the specific allegations in the letter that are pertinent to the Clean Air Act and local regulations.
Okay. Can we get a second from, that's a motion, get a second from me.
I'll second.
Mr. Sullivan has a second motion. You hear the proposed motion. Are there any questions regarding the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, let it be said by saying aye.
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 So,
Aye.
aye. Thank you. So, thank you. So,
Hold on a minute.
Carl, pardon me,
yes.
if the board could graciously extend us a date, that would be lovely.
30 days?
Before the next board meeting?
The next board meeting, which is
That's possible.
November the 16th.
Whatever is reasonable.
Is that reasonable, Ms. Hampton?
I'm shaking heads over here, so
Is
you're saying
that-
it's reasonable?
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So, Mr. Houston and Dr. Burkhart, you will receive a follow-up from the board regarding this. And again, I appreciate the time to take and share your concerns and with the board. But please feel free to contact Mrs. Hampton regarding any other issues. But I think that's about it, right?
I think one more thing we
Yeah.
should note is that there is no representative from Palmer Products here today to comment on this. Is that correct?
You're correct.
They have been given the opportunity to respond to it.
Well,
They
that
would-
makes sense.
They were
Yeah,
notified of this complaint and that we were going to address it at the meeting today and that they have elected not to be present. Is that a correct statement?
No, Dr. May, they weren't aware. This isn't like a hearing, so there isn't any requirement for them to have received the letter. However, we will make them aware that we've received it and that we're putting together our response, and we'll invite them to attend the November board meeting. That will be at their choice.
Okay, that sounds appropriate.
Okay.
I think that's appropriate with the board members, and I think that will satisfy the requirements that we will make sure they get their say in it. So, very good, thank you.
Okay.
Can
All
we
right.
move on?
Got a lot of things to move on here, so get started. Okay, on September 15th of this year, American Synthetic Rubber Company filed a petition for an administrative hearing in accordance with APCD Regulation 1.19 regarding its recently renewed Title V operating permit. As the board is aware, the board and the district's final determinations may be appealed for cause by a member of the public or the regulated source itself. In this case, there are 4 provisions in the 946-page renewed Title V operating permit that remained of concern to ASRC. This follows a very lengthy permit renewal process, including multiple reviews as the permit was being developed. I want to thank Eva Addison and Randy Shanebuckler for their work on this source. It is a very complex source, and that there are 4 outstanding issues is rather remarkable. You'll note that we've added this appeal to the enforcement report. It's at the bottom, even though it's not an enforcement action. But we wanted to be sure that we listed it in a consistent spot for appeals, which we'll work on, so we clarify that in the future.
Okay.
But we've created a new appeals docket on the recent actions page, where you'll be able to find the permit, not enforcement-related appeals. In accordance with District Regulation 1.19, at the end of the administrative hearing, the board will consider the report, recommended order, and exceptions, and adopt the final order resolving the matter. In light of this, Regulation 1.19 prohibits the board from having any communication concerning the merits of a proceeding with a party to the proceeding, a person interested in the proceeding, or a representative of a party or interested person, and a board member. Questions regarding case status or procedural requirements shall be addressed to the Secretary Treasurer, Mr. Byron Gary. Once adopted by the board, the final order may be appealed. Are there any questions about ASRC's appeal?
No. None.
Okay. On October 5th, Mayor Fisher signed a new executive order updating greenhouse gas emission reduction targets for Louisville. And unabashedly, I'll toot APCD's horn for the good work that our staff do every day. Today, however, I'm going to also toot the horn for our colleagues in the city's Office of Sustainability. Here are some important facts. In 2020, Louisville's greenhouse gas emission reduction plan recommended an 80% reduction in emissions of greenhouse gases by 2050. Since setting this initial target, more recent data and scientific consensus have recommended more ambitious emission targets to avoid the most catastrophic effects of climate change. In accordance with the recommendations of the International Panel for Climate Change and the Paris Agreement, greenhouse gas emissions must be halved by 2030 and reach net zero emissions by mid-century or sooner. In 2021, Louisville joined hundreds of global cities in the city's race to zero. From that commitment, our colleagues in the Office of Sustainability have established a new target for Louisville to halve emissions by 2030 and achieve net zero emissions by 2040. Existing plans, such as Greenhouse Gas Emission Reduction Plan and Prepare Louisville Climate Adaptation Plan, and the 100% Clean Energy Resolution passed by Metro Council, already provide a pathway to reduce emissions, and we will be building on these strategies. In 2021, Louisville Metro hired its first energy manager and reduced its energy consumption by 10%, saved over $1.2 million, and avoided 10,000 tons of CO2 equivalent emissions. This work to reduce the city's emissions and energy consumption is part of Louisville Metro's goals of 100% renewable electricity for Metro operations by 2030, 100% clean energy for Metro operations by 2035, and 100% clean energy community-wide by 2040. Mayor Fisher signed an executive order in 2040 directing all Louisville Metro government agencies to prioritize the purchasing of electric and hybrid vehicles and asked private businesses to follow suit. I think our fleet is out in the field today, but what you'll typically see here are 4 electric vehicles that APCD has acquired in response to that. The city continues to look at how to reinvest its savings in ways that will reduce its energy use even more. And then finally, historic federal legislation like the recently passed Inflation Reduction Act will further accelerate the work by providing additional consumer tax credits, rebates, grants, and other incentives to help residents and businesses access technologies that will save money and reduce greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution. We'll talk more about the Inflation Reduction Act air pollution reduction provisions at a future board meeting. They're quite substantial. The city's leadership on sustainability has created a foundation that supports APCD's own work in decreasing emissions and improving Louisville's air quality. When we switch to cleaner energy, we reduce air pollution. We are grateful to our city partners for their efforts and the improvements in air quality that they will bring to us, not when we reach those goals, but immediately when we move to cleaner energy use. Are there any questions on that?
No.
The district has continued to receive hundreds of sewer-related odor complaints since the September board meeting, many of which are in the neighborhoods closest to the Morris Foreman Water Quality Treatment Plant. MSD continues to fill catch basins, flush some lines, and add chemicals where appropriate to reduce odors. Per MSD, many of the catch basins that they initially filled have since dried out, so they are reactively trying to keep up with the odor complaints. As the board knows, MSD continues to implement the requirements in the board's agreed board order addressing odors west of 9th Street that were detected during the summer of 2019. MSD has posted the completed technical memoranda, cleaning schedule, complaint logs, and community meeting information on its recently developed odor control webpage. There are still some ongoing requirements, including technical memo number 8, new odor control technology recommendations, and technical memo number 9, odor control conceptual design. And those are due in the third quarter of 2022 and fourth quarter 2022, respectively. We should see those coming into the board here shortly. There's a final report for phase 1 summarizing the remaining technical memos 8 and 9, which will be submitted by the end of the fourth quarter of 2022. MSD has to host their final community meeting on wastewater treatment and related odors. That'll take place on November 29th. And they must provide online documentation on catch basins that have been cleaned, repaired, and maintained, and make that available by the end of the year. Finally, they need to provide an annual catch basin report focusing on the progress with the 109 untrapped Park Duval catch basins. Since entering the agreed board order with the Air Pollution Control Board, MSD has identified over 3,000 untrapped catch basins in the combined stormwater sewer system. We expect them to use the information contained in the technical memoranda to more proactively manage odors throughout its system that occur during dry weather. If our compliance officers could make it rain, I think they'd be in the parking lot doing a rain dance at the moment. This has been a very protracted period of odors, and MSD really needs to be more proactive in how they manage the system, in particular west of 9th. Are there any questions?
Do we have any sense, the 3,000 basins that are untrapped, is that, what percent of the area they've actually done a survey to determine?
So they've done a survey in the whole system. You can find this information in technical memoranda number 2, and it is on their website. We'll link these on our website. But of those 3,000, they looked at it in a little bit more granular detail as well, and about 280 of them are within 10 feet of what MSD considers to be a major sewer line. So that catch basin is like the J-trap under your sink. It's intended to keep the odors from entering the ambient air, and those are just straight shots into the sewer system, which I spoke to Brian Bingham, the Chief Executive Officer for MSD, earlier in the month. Their flow is usually about 80 million gallons on an average day, and they're down around 30. So unfortunately, the waste material in the sewer system is moving very slowly, and the biological processes that typically take place at Morris Foreman are instead happening at the street level. So we'll hope that we'll get some rain here in the next week, and that they'll be able to have enough rain to flush things into Morris Foreman for proper treatment. Carl, did you have?
I have no questions.
Okay.
I had one question. MSD did open up some fire hydrants to try to improve the water and flow in some of the more egregious areas, and that seemed to be like just because it was just that bad, but when you said it's like you'd like them to be more proactive, I mean, are they, I mean, that is something they can do. I don't know if that has other secondary impacts in terms of water level or availability or pressure, but, and I don't know what cost that is, in terms of having water usage, but is that something that we can ask them to be more proactive about?
Yes, and in terms of flushing the sewers, that's really, at this point, a very reactive, they're in a reactive phase, unfortunately, with this particular event. When they look at flushing the lines, according to my conversation with Brian Bingham, they want to work with Louisville Water Company to be sure that the amount of water that they would need to really clean out the area won't cause a loss of pressure for firefighting or for public use. So they are collaborating with Louisville Water as they can to try to reduce odors. In terms of being more proactive, what we'd like to see, I believe, is for MSD, beginning in early summer, to focus in those areas where we receive the most complaints, begin a process of cleaning out the catch basins, being sure that the catch basins in those areas are properly functioning, and filling them so that they're not already dry when we hit dry weather. And then being sure that they continue on a more continuous basis to fill those catch basins based on the data that we have from our odor complaints, so we can identify those areas that are most problematic. We think that that would be possible, and we'll likely sit down with MSD to direct them to do that.
Any questions from board members?
I have one more. I was just thinking that one of the city's goals was to try to improve the like water retention, you know, like with planting and things like that, and that when we have too much concrete and asphalt, then it overwhelms the MSD system, you know, in terms of overflow. So it's like it's either, it's drought or, it's feast or famine, it seems, and I don't know that I have a question. I just bring up.
It's a very timely comment, Dr. May. This morning, I heard on the news that MSD has cut the ribbon on a 4-mile-long tunnel that combines with a number of storage basins that they've developed throughout the county area, where they're going to be able to retain wastewater during those wet weather events and not discharge it untreated to the river. So they're essentially going to capture it, store it, and then when there is capacity at Morris Foreman to treat it, they're going to let it go and run it through the system and treat it. I think WFPL has an article on that this morning, but they are under a consent order from US EPA for stormwater discharges. You can't discharge untreated sewage to the river, and that tunnel and the basins that they've constructed are intended to rectify that.
When were they up and going, do you know?
Sorry?
When will they turn them on? Effectively, when will
So
they
the basins
go in
have been
operation?
operating.
Right.
As they were developed, they've been
Right.
put into practice.
But I'm talking about the retention tunnel.
I think they're using it.
Okay,
So I think today was just a big kickoff.
okay.
So
You would think that would alleviate some of the flow problems,
it
if they're pumping it back through the system.
might, depending on rain. And a lot of this is very weather dependent. You know, we're in our dry period here, in August through September, with a little bit of, extension into October sometimes. But even managing that retained wastewater will have its challenges because our system is open. So they're going to be mindful, based on my conversations with Brian, that when they have retained sewage, they don't discharge it in a way that creates its own odor issue. MSD is a very important part of our public health system. Treating wastewater is a very important part of protecting public health. They have a big job and a big system that's very old, and I respect that they have challenges. Yeah. And I appreciate the fact that the board has directed them to look at how they're going to manage that system today more effectively to reduce odors. On Saturday, October 1st, several district staff members attended the West Jefferson County Community Task Force's Climate Change and Health, People, Principles, Priority, and Policy Making Environmental Summit. It was a very informative summit that included presentations on environmental justice, sustainability and energy efficiency, health equity, climate change, odors, and redevelopment and reinvestment in the Park Hill neighborhood. Damon Talley, MSD's operations director, and I both shared presentations on odors. On October 13th, the district hosted a Clearing the Air workshop titled Keep Louisville Leafy, the Impact of Trees and Vegetation on Air Quality. Bradley Coombs, environmental coordinator, talked about how trees and other types of vegetation, mainly Kentucky natives, impact our air quality. There was a question and answer session directly following the presentation, which was held virtually and recorded. And the district's Clearing the Air workshops give the public an inside look at the district and the work that's done to improve the air we breathe. It also provides an opportunity to connect with and ask questions of the professionals tasked with protecting our air quality. Our Clearing the Air workshop is also one of our equity goals, which you can review on our website under the About the APCD tab. On October 6th, we recently shared our progress on our equity goals and our ongoing work with Metro Council's Equity and Inclusion Committee. Any questions?
No.
Monday night, Matt King, APCD's Environmental Engineering Manager, and I, along with other Metro representatives, including Public Works, Codes and Regs, LMPD, MSD, and other local fire department reps, attended the Lake Forest Homeowner Association's annual meeting. We shared information on how to participate in the open public comment period on the now proposed permit for Sunshine Industries concrete batch plant on Aiken Road, including submitting written comments. The comment period extends until November 11th. And they could comment by attending the upcoming public hearing on November the 10th at 6 p.m., which will be held both in person and virtually. The proposed permit and statement of basis are available on the district's proposed actions webpage. The proposed plant will also be the subject of a planning commission hearing on November the 3rd. Any questions?
Will the notice be placed in the newspaper regarding the Lake Forest? Because that's pretty, I mean, people are really concerned about that concrete plant being built over on Aikens Road, so.
So it has been published in the Courier Journal.
Okay.
It's been sent out to our Gov Delivery listserv,
Okay.
which right now contains about 4,000 names.
Right.
Shared with Metro Council to distribute to their constituents. It is on our website under proposed action. So folks should be able to find that information, or they can call 574-6000 and we'll direct them to where they can find that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure because, you know, their biggest complaint was that they wasn't aware of the zoning meeting that approved the concrete plant, so.
We received over 400 requests for a public hearing before we had even proposed a
400?
permit.
Wow.
So lots of interest. Today is the last day to complete Metro's compensation study. So some of us have some work to do this afternoon, including me. Overall, I think we have all appreciated the opportunity to share our work, including its complexities and challenges. And I mentioned this at the last board meeting. Metro government, Metro-wide, has asked 6,000 employees to do a very detailed survey of what their job requires. And so it's been an interesting process. I look forward to seeing the report from the consultants. A draft is supposed to be prepared by the first of the year, and we'll see where it goes from there. But our challenges don't end. At the same time we undertook this widespread compensation study, we've transitioned to Workday, our new financial management system and soon-to-be timekeeping system. And this has not been without a few hiccups. I am grateful for Michelle King, the district's executive administrator, director of program planning, and Monica Little, the district's administrative coordinator, for their patience, professionalism, and good cheer as we work through these issues. I'm confident we'll get through this, and I'm fairly confident we'll get everyone paid eventually. Bear with us. And finally, as I reported last month, the district is one of 9 programs nationally that has retained delegation of the Risk Management Plan, or RMP program, which focuses on reducing the potential from chemical accidents. If there are no other questions for me, Byron Gary will be sharing a presentation this morning on US EPA's recently proposed additional updates to the regulations, which includes a public comment period that will end on October 30th. And as the board may remember, we've retained this program because of Rubbertown. We believe it's important that these sources be inspected more frequently than US EPA has indicated it could do so. So in the rest of the country, EPA hopes to inspect 3% of the RMP sources each year. We don't believe that that would be sufficient for Louisville. The board recently provided some updates to to APCD Regulation 5.15, which makes it stronger than the current federal law. And Byron, if the board is ready?
Kind of one question. Are these facilities required to submit the risk management plan to the district?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So Byron's going to walk us through where our program is at, where EPA is
Okay.
proposing to take its program, and I appreciate the detail.
I'm gonna hover behind you here, Rachel, sorry.
I'm going to the end so I can watch. Get the letter for you.
Oh, thank you. So Director Hamilton asked me to give a brief overview of the RMP program, our local implementation. Unfortunately, DJ Fountain, who's our district staff member who oversees the implementation, wasn't able to be here this morning. But I'm sure he's glad to answer any questions if they come up. And the new US EPA proposal. Hope this works. All right. So just starting with a brief overview of the program itself. In 1986, there was the disaster in Bhopal, India, that we're all familiar with. Several thousand people died. It spurred Congress to take a number of different actions. The first was in 1987, the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act, or EFRA. This is the reason for the toxic release inventory that you cite often in your questions, Chairman Hilton. But after that, in 1990, as part of the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990, they also adopted a new section, 112R of the Clean Air Act, that required EPA to oversee the Chemical Accident Prevention Provisions, or Risk Management Plan, RMP program. 1996 is when EPA first adopted the RMP plan, or RMP program rules. And then in 1999, they delegated implementation of that to APCD here locally. So we've been overseeing this program here locally for 23 years now. Sorry, this is kind of small to see for those in the room, but there are three parts to the RMP that the companies submit to us. The first is a hazard assessment where they take into account the chemicals that they have on site, the processes that they use them in, and they do things such as calculate the off-site consequences and worst-case scenarios if there were to be an accident with one of these processes or chemicals. The second part is to implement a prevention program to oversee and make sure that these accidents don't happen to the best of their ability. This includes safety precautions and maintenance, employee participation and training, and monitoring of those processes. The final element of an RMP is a response program. The companies, some are responding companies themselves. They actually, if there were to be an accident, are responsible for being the first on site to put out that fire or to contain that spill or whatever it may be. Some of them are non-responding, and they have to coordinate, either responding or non-responding. They have to coordinate with the local emergency management agency. They have to coordinate with the local emergency planning coordination committee, and they have to coordinate with local agencies like the fire department just to make sure that they are aware of what the possibilities are and make sure they know how to get in touch with them and communicate what has happened if were there to be an accident. So here in Louisville, as Director Hamilton mentioned, we aim to oversee the risk management plan facilities by inspecting 1/3 of them every year. So 30% of them every year, so every 3 years, each facility gets inspected. This is compared to roughly 3% inspection frequency that EPA aims for in the rest of the country. And that's most of the rest of the country that is overseen by EPA. We're one of 9 agencies, and that includes North Carolina that has both state and I think 3 locals. So that's like half of it right there, aside from us. Aside from that, we also have a really good relationship with most of these companies. So we get regular communications from them. We also coordinate with the emergency management agency that does the inspections for us. So we're really on site and well aware of what's going on at these facilities. Just really quickly, this is a map of the facilities here in Louisville. As you can see, they are primarily concentrated in the Rubbertown area. I believe there are 6 chemical manufacturing facilities, those red dots right around the Rubbertown area. There are a few over by the airport and a couple scattered around in other places. You see a few food manufacturing and storage warehouse sites. These are primarily because they use ammonia in their refrigeration processes, and that's one of the regulated chemicals. So going back to the EPA proposal, we actually have to start back a few years. In 2013, there was an explosion at a storage facility for ammonium nitrates in West Texas. They were actually a fertilizer distributor that caught fire, blew up, and I believe killed 13 people. Most of them were first responders, fire department locally, got to the site, weren't aware of what was stored there. They just thought they were putting out a fire, and then it caught the ammonium nitrate, blew up, and killed a number of them. In response to that, the President issued an executive order mandating the review of a number of different chemical and safety programs nationally. One of them was the RMP program. And as a result of that, in 2017, EPA adopted amendments to the RMP program. That was at the tail end of the Obama administration. The next administration came in, sort of put a freeze on that, and began a reconsideration process at the petition of a number of states as well as industries. In 2019, they finalized the reconsideration process. I'll go through sort of what was proposed and what they did when they reconsidered it in just a moment. But in 2021, you, the board, adopted a number of those provisions that were actually reconsidered by EPA in 2019. So we did go beyond what is in the current national program as far as our rules. We already go beyond as far as our inspections. And just in August of this year, EPA proposed what they're calling the Safer Communities Through Chemical Accident Prevention. I haven't heard pronunciation of that abbreviation yet, so I'm going with SCAP, but take your pick. But that is the current proposal. The comment period ends at the end of this month. So this is even harder to see. I didn't realize how small it would be here in the room. But basically, in 2017, EPA adopted a number of provisions to strengthen the risk management plan program. The first two deal with things that companies have to do after there is a reportable accident. So the first is they are required to have a third party come in and audit all of their processes, in particular the one that went through whatever accident they were reporting. And they also are required to conduct a root cause analysis to find not just the immediate cause of that accident, but the underlying root cause of what happened, what went wrong. The third provision there is the Safer Technology Alternatives Analysis, or STAA. This is something that had been implemented by a couple of local programs, including Richmond, California, and New Jersey, requiring companies to analyze their processes as well as the chemicals they use and determine whether there were any safer alternatives to those processes or chemicals, as well as the human elements. They had to consider whether there was a way to cut that out and make it more automatic to prevent accidents from occurring. The next two deal with emergency response. The first is requirements that companies coordinate with the emergency response officials in their area at least annually to make sure that they have that clear connection with them, that they know how to communicate when there is an accident and how to communicate the relevant information that emergency response agency might need. The one below that is emergency response exercises. And this was a requirement that every 3 years, companies conduct tabletop exercises with emergency response officials in their area to go through what happens when there is an accident, simulate that sort of accident just on a tabletop. And then every 10 years, actually go through a field exercise where they would actually have the emergency response agency come and respond as if it were an accident that occurred at their facility. The last was expanded information sharing responsibilities. They required companies to hold a public meeting after one of those reportable accidents so that they could sort of respond on what happened and what they were doing about it, and also to have an ongoing responsibility to turn over certain elements of their RMP to the public upon request. It's hard to tell, but this is what happened with reconsideration. Most of those programs and strengthening elements were eliminated, including the requirement for a third-party audit, the requirement for root cause analysis, the requirement for safer technology alternatives analysis, and they also eliminated the frequency requirements for those emergency response exercises. So rather than every 3 years for tabletop exercises and every 10 years for an actual field exercise, they just said, you guys figure it out with the emergency response officials and we trust you. The board decided upon the recommendation of the district to actually adopt a number of these requirements even after they were rolled back by EPA. So the third-party audit, incident investigation root cause analysis, and safer technology alternatives analysis, analyses were all required locally now for processes in North American Industry Classification System codes, NAICS codes 322, 324, and 325. This is primarily oil and gas and chemical manufacturing facilities. These are the ones that EPA determined in their initial RMP amendments rule were the most likely to have accidents and also the most dangerous when there were accidents. They caused the most consequences off-site. The SDAA was required just for new processes in NAICS codes 322, 324, and 325, but otherwise those were required anytime there was an accident. We did not make changes to the emergency response coordination activities or emergency response exercises, primarily because we do have that great response, the great coordination with our emergency response agency already. We do believe that we probably would have those every 10 years and every 3 years at least anyway, just because of our relationship with EMA and with the local fire departments. The last provision, that ongoing requirement to turn over information from companies, we did not recommend the board adopt, nor did the board adopt, primarily because the reason for rolling that back had to do with Homeland Security, and we didn't feel we had the expertise to make a recommendation counter to EPA's regarding that provision. And just finally, what's in the Safer Community through chemical accident prevention provisions. They are readopting a number of those provisions. They are all adopted in some slightly more limited fashion. This is just a list of all of those provisions again and how they are limiting them somewhat. Most notably for the third-party audit and the SDAA, they are limiting the applicability of those to those chemical and oil and gas facilities only when they are within 1 mile of another facility in those same NAICS codes. They are also limiting the information sharing to somebody who lives within 6 miles of the facility. So you can only request that information from a facility if you live nearby. They are adding a number of provisions, most significantly in response to concerns about climate change. There have been a number of accidents at chemical facilities, particularly after floods and hurricanes, where they lose power, and that allows some process to get out of control. So they have required facilities to look at how natural hazards, including those caused by climate change, potentially impact their facility as part of that hazard assessment. They're also requiring them to look at facility siting as part of their hazard assessments. This includes not only where the entire facility is located, but within that facility's boundaries, where they put those processes. Do they put them over next to the river, or do they move them further inland away from where those hazards are? There's also new employee participation requirements, including the chance for employees who see something unsafe happening to just say no and shut it down on their own before going through management. And finally, those community notification of RMP accidents, they are requiring not only coordination with the emergency response agency, but particularly for those responding companies, that they have a way to notify the community directly when something's happening as quickly as possible so that they know what's going on in their community. I should note all of these, of course, are stronger than our current program. These are things that hadn't been proposed before. We had no real basis for suggesting we incorporate them. But if they are adopted, would be something we would, of course, look at and probably have to recommend adoption locally to maintain implementation here. But aside from that, going back to the third-party audit, this is a detailed list, and this presentation will be available on the web afterwards, so if you want to see exactly what all's here. But there are a number of provisions that are going beyond what we did adopt here locally, but there are a number of provisions that would still remain weaker than what we have here locally. In particular, that SDAA and third-party audit only being required of facilities when they are within 1 mile of another facility. While Rubbertown's pretty dense and it would apply to most of the facilities out there, there are a handful of chemical facilities here in Louisville that would not have to do the third-party audit or SDAA provisions under the proposals that were adopted. So with that, I think that's all I have. If there are any questions, I'm glad to answer them at the discretion of the chair.
Chairman Hilton, if I could interrupt for just 1 second. I want to thank Byron for going through this rule because I've I've started it on several occasions and I haven't been able to get myself through it. This will be available on our website.
Okay,
This
good.
is of concern to many in our community, and we appreciate the board's leadership. With respect to how this works, the RMP program is really focusing on a small number of companies here in Louisville and across the nation. Here in Louisville, though, companies that have threshold amounts of certain hazardous materials are required under the State Emergency Response Commission and the Local Emergency Planning Commission to provide detailed lists of those chemicals to the local fire department. And that applies to many different operations. And that's intended to prevent that harm that Byron described when those firefighters approach that plant in West Texas. The Louisville Metropolitan Sewer District is the implementer of the Hazardous Materials Ordinance, and there are provisions under that ordinance that drive that information sharing to first responders. APCD is not a first responding agency. That's why we provide for half the salary and benefits for an inspector on the emergency management services staff to be our boots on the ground. They are trained first responders, and they are the ones who inspect on our behalf. We administer the program, we review the plans, we make sure that they meet the required elements of the RMP program. And as Byron said, we work collaboratively with those first responders here in Louisville to be sure that the facilities follow this rule and that we understand how any releases may be impacted under our permitting program. So thank you for letting me interrupt.
Rachel, before you speak anymore, I just want to know, you're off camera. If you want to take your seat back, I'll let you have it. I'll move out of the way unless there are any questions. I just wanted to point out, this is what a Federal Register notice looks like. So you think my text is a little dense. There's 60 pages of triple column text to go through here to try and figure out exactly what's being proposed. So if you don't have the chance to, but want to comment and have any further questions, I'm glad to answer those so that I can try and make clear, to my understanding, as best as I got it from reading this, what's being proposed.
Yeah.
The district will be preparing comments as well, just sort of noting that we do implement some of these provisions here locally that are being proposed in some fashion. We haven't really had a chance to implement the third-party audit or root cause analysis provisions, fortunately, because there haven't been any accidents since adoption at those facilities that would require those to be kicked in. So we will just sort of outline generally what it takes to implement a, we believe, successful program locally.
Any sense on the timing of adopting or?
That's a good question. So in 2017, when they adopted the amendments initially, they had proposed those about 2 years prior. That can be the timeline that it takes for them to adopt something like this. I think the provisions originally were proposed in 2015 or early 2016, which would have put it closer to a year, but I want to say closer to 2 years. I think they may have, talking to DJ, there's a sense that they may have learned a lesson from being reversed so quickly last time and not wanting to leave it until the very end of their administration. I'm far from a politician and don't pretend to understand politics at all, but my understanding of the political aspect here is that they have learned that lesson and don't want to wait until the very end anymore.
Thank you. Mr. Gary, thank you for a detailed presentation on the risk management plan. And there's a link that we can go in and see that on the website.
The presentation will be posted after this.
Okay. Are there any personal comments from board members? If not, again, thank you. And also I want to thank Ms. Hampson for your director's report. Very detailed. Thank you. Moving right along. We got our quality data report. Board members received that electronically. Are there any questions or comments regarding our quality data? I think I talked to Billy yesterday, and I think the ozone season ends, is it October the 30th?
Yes, it goes through October, Chairman.
Okay. Hopefully, we won't have any more sequences because I think the winter's going to be quite cool between now and October the 30th, I think so.
I hope so as well.
Well, thank you.
So as we stand right now,
We are still maintaining
maintaining.
compliance with the standard. Our request for redesignation for the 2015 ozone standard is still with US EPA. We spoke with them this week, and it's our understanding that it's ready to go through their signature chain to then be published in that tiny little font, like Byron showed you, in the Federal Register for approval. That will bring our area back fully into attainment for all of the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. We do expect to have a proposal from US EPA. We heard this fall, so they might make it, revising the particulate matter standard.
Okay.
And again, we've heard somewhere between 10 micrograms per cubic meter to 8 micrograms per cubic meter, maybe the new standard.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Any other questions regarding the air quality data? Moving along to our toxic report, any questions, comments regarding that report? The enforcement status report. We do have the litigation report at the bottom of the page, thank you. Access emission report, any questions, comments regarding that report? Complaint investigation status summary. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of complaints of people burning leaves. That's the time of year that people burn a lot of leaves. So that'll probably show up for next month. Before I close the meeting, I'd like to thank Dr. Burkhardt and Mr. Houston for your attendance and your input today. Are there any other questions or comments from board members? If not, I will now adjourn the regular meeting of the board, and thank you for your participation and attendance. The next board meeting is Wednesday, November the 16th at 10 a.m. Thanks, everyone.